Shoot me quick, mister. They're already coming for what's left. Silas Rourke froze in the barn doorway, his lantern swinging a yellow arc across the straw. The woman spoke again from behind the feed barrels, her voice raw as a rope drawn over stone. He couldn't see her face. He could see her hand, though small, bloodied at the knuckles, gripping the handle of his own splitting axe like she meant to use it on herself before anyone else got the chance. Come out where I can see you. His thumb rested on the hammer of the Colt at his hip. He hadn't drawn it. Something in her voice, the flat weariness of a person already halfway gone, kept his palm still. I ain't coming out. A dry cough. You open that door wider, and they'll see the light. They'll ride straight for you. Who? She laughed. It was the ugliest sound he'd heard in the year since his wife died. Mister, if you gotta ask, then you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The wind picked up outside, moaning low through the split boards of the loft, carrying with it the smell of dust and sage and something else, smoke, faint, from somewhere far south. Silas set the lantern on the hitching post and stepped in slow, hands raised, showing empty palms even though the Colt still hung heavy at his side. My name's Rourke. Silas Rourke. This here's my land. 9 miles from Cripple Fork. Ain't nobody comin' for me tonight or any night. So put the axe down and let me look at you. Silence. Then a shifting sound, straw whispering, and she edged into the lantern glow. She was younger than her voice, maybe 25, maybe less. Dark hair matted flat against one temple where blood had dried in a stiff crescent. Her dress had once been blue calico, city cut, the kind a woman wore to travel. Now it hung in strips from the hem to the knee, and one sleeve was black with something Silas didn't want to name. Her left eye was swollen half shut. Her right eye was clear and hard, and watching him the way a hawk watches a rabbit, measuring the distance. She still held the axe. You ain't from around here, Silas said. No. You hurt bad. Bad enough. He crouched slow, keeping his hands where she could see them. The floor of the barn was cold through his boots. Above them, in the loft, one of his hens muttered in her sleep and settled again. Ma'am, I got a house not 50 steps that way. Got a fire in the stove. Got water hot for washing. Got bandages and coffee, and a bed my wife slept in that ain't been slept in for a year. He drew a slow breath. I ain't a skin who you are. I ain't a skin what you done. I'm a skin, will you let me help you before you bleed out on my hay? She stared at him a long moment. The axe wavered. Why? The question wasn't small. She meant it like an interrogation. Because, Silas said, the last person I didn't help is buried behind that ridge, and I ain't sleepin' good since. Something shifted in her face. Not softening. She was past softening, but a kind of listening. She let the axe head drop until the blade touched the straw. You got any whiskey? Half a bottle. Bring it. And the bandages. And don't light no more lamps by the window. And if you hear hooves coming up the north wash, you douse every flame you got, and you swear to God you never seen me. Ma'am. Swear it, Rourke. Before you touch me. He looked at her. At the calico. At the axe. At the dried blood and the hard right eye, and the way her hand shook now that she wasn't holding it up on purpose anymore. I swear it, he said. He carried her across the yard in his arms because her legs gave out 3 steps from the barn door. She weighed almost nothing. Her head against his collarbone smelled of horse sweat and gunpowder and something floral underneath, lavender, maybe, from a soap used a long time ago in a life that wasn't this one. The house was 1 room and a loft. A cast-iron stove, a plank table, his dead wife's rocker still angled toward the window like Mary might come back any minute and sit down and finish her mending. Silas laid the stranger on the bed and drew the curtain across the window before he even lit a candle. Don't look while I clean the shoulder, she said. Her eyes were closed now, cheek pressed into the ticking. It ain't a bullet. It's a knife. And it's set in ugly. I've seen ugly. Not this kind. He cut the sleeve away with his skinning knife, gentle as he could, and she was right. It wasn't the kind he'd seen. The wound was deep and clean-edged, the way a good blade cuts when a man means to leave a message and not a corpse. Around it, black-blue bruising in the shape of fingers. Someone had held her down while they did this. Silas felt something old and dangerous stir under his ribs. He worked in silence. Whiskey to clean. Strips of a torn sheet to bind. She hissed once, cursed low and steady, then went quiet. When he was done, he covered her with the wool blanket and sat back on his heels. You got a name? Yeah. You gonna tell it to me? She opened her hard right eye, looked at him a long moment across the candle flame. Not yet. Outside, far off, a coyote yipped once and cut short. Silas turned his head toward the sound. When he looked back, she was watching the window, jaw tight, as if she could see straight through the curtain to whatever was riding somewhere out there in the dark. How long? He asked. 2 days behind me. Maybe less. How many? 6. Maybe 7 now. And what did you do, ma'am, to bring 6 armed men across 2 days of hard country? Her mouth curved. It wasn't a smile. It was something older and colder than a smile. I stayed alive, she said. That's what I done. And they can't afford it. The candle guttered. Silas leaned back against the wall and watched her breathing slow toward sleep. One hand still curled around the axe handle she'd refused to leave behind. And he understood in his bones that he had just brought a war home to his barn. She slept 11 hours. Silas didn't sleep at all. He sat in Mary's rocker with his rifle across his knees and watched the door and watched the woman and watched the slow gray leaking in through the crack under the curtain. When light came full, he stood, stiff in the hips, and went outside to see what the world looked like on a morning that had a stranger in his bed and 6 riders somewhere on his horizon. The yard was quiet. His 2 horses stamped in the corral, restless, having smelled her all night. The chickens fussed and settled. A single hawk turned lazy circles above the north ridge, and Silas studied it for a long time, because a hawk that high meant nothing was moving down low that shouldn't be. Yet, he fed the animals. He hauled water. He did the small, honest work of a man who had 80 acres and no neighbors closer than 6 miles, and while his hands moved, his mind turned over the choice she had put in front of him without asking. 6 men, or 7, coming across the wash for a woman who wouldn't say her name. He could ride to Cripple Fork. Tell the sheriff. Let the law handle it. Sheriff Halden was a decent man, tired and cautious, but decent. Except the wound on her shoulder was made by someone who knew how to hurt a person without killing them. That wasn't outlaw work. That was patient work. And Silas had lived long enough to know that when patient men came looking for a woman with fresh knife wounds and a face full of bruises, the law was very often standing on the wrong side of the door. He carried the second bucket of water back to the house and pushed the door open with his shoulder. She was sitting up. The axe was in her lap. The blanket was pulled to her waist. His dead wife's shirt hung off her thin shoulders. She must have found it in the trunk. Her hair was combed back with her fingers, damp where she'd splashed water from the basin, and in the daylight he could see her face proper for the first time. She wasn't beautiful. Her nose had been broken once and healed crooked. There was a small white scar cutting through her lower lip. But her eyes, even the swollen one, half open now, had a kind of intelligence that made Silas take his hat off without meaning to. You could have killed me last night, she said. In my sleep. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you? He set the water bucket down. Same reason I didn't shoot in the barn. Which is, he thought about it honestly. I'm tired of burying things. She nodded once, slow, like she was writing that down somewhere inside her head. I need to leave, she said. Today, before dark. You can't ride. I'll ride. You'll open that shoulder, and you'll be dead by the second creek. Then that's what happens. No, ma'am. Silas pulled the chair around and sat down across from her, close enough to speak low. That ain't what happens. Not while you're under my roof. If you die today, you die because 6 men rode up and I couldn't stop him. Not because I let you climb on a horse with a hole in your shoulder. Her jaw tightened. That old refusal in her eyes. You don't know what I brought here. I got a fair idea. You don't. You think it's a gang. It's not a gang. She leaned forward, and pain crossed her face like a shadow across water. It's a man, and the men he pays, and the badges he owns. And it goes higher than you think, mister, higher than any sheriff you can ride to. And if you keep me here past noon, they'll burn this house down with you inside it, and they'll salt the ground after. He absorbed that, held her gaze. Tell me your name. No. Tell me your name, he said again, or I saddle your horse right now and I walk you to it, and I let you die on the trail, because I won't fight blind for a ghost. Silence. The stove ticked as it cooled. Then, quiet, Rose. My name is Rose Halloran. The name meant nothing to him. He waited. You don't know it, she said. Good. Neither should the men hunting me, but somebody talked, and now they do. She looked down at the axe in her lap. I was a witness, Mr. Rourke. 6 months ago, in Denver, to a killing that wasn't supposed to have any witnesses. A man named Corbin Vale killed a federal judge in a hotel room and paid 2 deputies to say the judge died of a bad heart. I saw it through the transom. I was the mate on that floor. Silas felt the cold walk down his spine, one vertebra at a time. They put me in a safe house, Rose went on. Then they moved me. Then the safe house burned. Then the marshal escorting me west put a knife in my shoulder to be sure I couldn't run, and I killed him with his own boot knife, and I run anyway. Her voice cracked, just once, and she pushed it back down. That's what's coming up your wash, Mr. Rourke. That's what you took into your barn. He was quiet a long time. He looked at the rocker where Mary used to sit. He looked at the door where a year ago he had carried Mary out of the house wrapped in a sheet because the fever took her and there had been no one to help him lift her, no neighbor close enough, no doctor who came in time. And he had spent every day since telling himself the story of a man who had done everything he could and knowing, in the smallest hour of the night, that he hadn't. He stood up. Stay in bed, he said. I'll saddle nothing. I'll ride nowhere. I'll fetch the shotgun down from the beam and I'll oil it, and I'll make coffee, and around noon I'll walk the North Ridge and see what's on it. Mr. Rourke. Silas, you don't owe me this. No, ma'am. I don't. He took his hat off the peg, set it on again, looked at her steady. But I owe somebody. And you'll do. He was pulling on his coat when he heard it. Faint, carried on the noon-warming wind, so far away it might have been imagination. Hoofbeats. More than one horse. Coming from the North Wash. Rose heard them too. Her hand closed around the axe. They're early, she whispered. Silas moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides, lifted the shotgun from the beam, broke it open, thumbed 2 shells into the breech, and snapped it shut. He handed Rose the Colt from his hip without a word. She took it left-handed, her good hand, and checked the cylinder with the practiced flick of a woman who had done this before in a life she hadn't yet described. How many you here? He said. 3 horses. Maybe 4. Not 6. Not yet. They split. Scout's first. The others come behind. He nodded. That tracked. Patient men work that way. Get under the bed. All the way to the wall. Take the axe. If they come through that door and I go down, you don't fight. You run out the back through the root cellar. Trap doors under the rag rug. Come out by the woodshed. Take the roan. She's faster. Ride southeast. Not south. They'll expect south. Silas. Do it. She slid off the bed and went to the floor without argument, which told him more about her past than any story she'd offered. He kicked the rug back, checked the trapdoor was clear, dropped the rug again. Then he walked outside into the yard, shotgun broken open over his forearm like a man on his way to shoot rabbits. The hoofbeats were closer now, coming down the wagon track, not sneaking through the brush, which meant they wanted to be seen, wanted him relaxed, wanted him to think they were neighbors or drifters or lost. 3 riders crested the low rise by the cottonwoods. They rode easy, dusters, wide hats, rifles in the scabbards, not in the hands. The lead rider was heavy-shouldered and gray at the temples with a badge pinned to his coat that caught the sun. A U.S. Marshal's star. The 2 behind him wore no badges at all. Silas stopped in the middle of his yard and waited. They reined up 10 yards short. The gray-templed man touched his hat brim. Polite as Sunday. Afternoon, friend. Silas Rourke, is it? It is. Deputy Marshal Emmett Cole. Denver office. The badge glinted. We're tracking a fugitive. Woman, dark hair, wounded in the shoulder. Killed a federal officer 6 days back. We got word she come through the Cripple Fork Road. Word from who? Cole smiled the way a card player smiles when the cards are all his. Word from a boy at the livery in Cripple Fork who said a woman matched in the description, bought bandages, and rode out this direction 2 nights ago. Silas kept his face empty. Rose hadn't been to Cripple Fork. She'd told him she'd come across country, which meant either the livery boy was lying or Cole was. He'd bet on Cole. Ain't seen her. You sure about that, Mr. Rourke? I've been alone on this place since my wife passed. I'd remember a woman. One of the men behind Cole shifted in his saddle. His hand drifted an inch closer to his rifle butt. Silas saw it and let his own thumb rest on the shotgun's hammer, still broken open, still innocent-looking. Mind if we take a look in your barn? Cole said. Just to be certain. Federal business, you understand. I do mind. Beg pardon. I mind. Silas kept his voice easy. Man's barn is his own. You want to search it, You bring me a paper from a judge. Otherwise, you ride on. Cole's smile stayed exactly where it was. Only his eyes changed. Mr. Rourke, I'd hate for this to go hard. Then don't make it hard, Marshal. For a long moment the yard was very quiet. A jay called from the cottonwoods. Silas's mare stamped once in the corral. The wind stirred grit against his boots, and he could feel every grain of it. Then Cole nodded, small, like a man conceding a point in a debate. Fair enough, he said. Fair enough. I respect a man knows his rights. He touched his hat again. We'll be moving on. If you happen to see the woman, you send word to Cripple Fork. There's a reward. $200, gold. I'll remember. Cole turned his horse. The other two turned with him. They rode back up the track at the same easy pace they'd come down, and Silas stood in his yard and watched them until the cottonwoods hid them, and then he stood a while longer, because he knew, the way a man knows a storm before it breaks, that they hadn't left. They'd only ridden to the ridge. He went back inside. Rose. She came out from under the bed white-faced but steady. Cole. Cole. Her breath went out of her in a shudder. He was there. In Denver. He's Vale's man. He's not a marshal. The badge is bought. He's on the North Ridge right now. He's waitin' for dark, or he's waitin' for the other three to come up behind. Silas, we have to go? Now. Before. No, he was already moving, gathering things. Ammunition from the drawer. His wife's medicine bag from the shelf. Hard bread and dried apples wrapped in cloth. We go now. We die on open ground. He wants us running. We stay. We ford up. We make him come to the door. There's 4 of them and 1 of you. There's 4 of them, 1 of me, and 1 of you with a Colt in your left hand, ma'am, and unless I'm mistaken you know how to use it. She almost smiled. It was the first almost smile he'd seen on her. I know how to use it. They worked fast. Silas nailed the shutters half closed, leaving slits to shoot through. He filled every bucket, pot, and basin with water from the pump. He led both horses from the corral into the root cellar entrance, cramped but hidden, and if the barn burned, the animals would live. He soaked the roof cedar with the last of the well water because he knew, Cole would try fire first. Dusk fell copper and heavy. The wind died the way it does before something bad. Rose sat propped against the wall by the west shutter, Colt braced on her thigh. Silas knelt by the door with the shotgun across his knees and Mary's old squirrel rifle loaded on the floor beside him. Silas. Yeah. If this goes bad, if they get through, you don't let them take me alive. You understand what I'm skinned. He looked at her across the dim room. The candle wasn't lit. Only the last dusk light through the shutter slits. It ain't gonna go bad. Silas. I understand what you're a skin, Rose. I ain't gonna do it. But I understand. Outside, somewhere in the gathering dark, a horse whickered soft. Then, closer, much closer than the ridge, a boot scuffed gravel. They were already in the yard. The first shot came through the shutter above Silas's head. Splinters rained. He returned fire without looking, shotgun kicking twice into the dark, and heard a man grunt and fall in the yard. Rose fired once from the west shutter, a clean crack, and someone cursed and scrambled behind the water trough. Then silence. The stupid silence men use when they've realized this isn't going to be easy. Cole's voice rose from behind the barn. Rourke, we only want the woman. You send her out. You keep your house. You keep your life. That's a fair trade, friend. Silas didn't answer. He was already reloading in the dark by feel. Rourke, last offer. Rose whispered across the room. He's lying. He can't leave you alive. You saw his face. I know. He crawled to the front shutter, put his eye to the slit. The moon was up, a thin quarter, enough to see shapes. 2 men behind the trough. 1 down in the yard, unmoving. He couldn't see Cole. Cole would be somewhere with a rifle, waiting for a head at a window. Silas eased back from the slit. Rose. The lantern by the stove. Light it. Set it on the table. They'll see the window. That's the idea. She understood a second later, and her almost smile came back, grim. She lit the lantern one-handed with a match struck against the floorboard, set it burning bright on the plank table, and slid herself flat against the wall away from the light. Silas took position by the door, low, in the dark corner. They waited. 10 seconds. 20. The rifle shot came from the cottonwoods, precise, aimed at where a man's head would be if a man were foolish enough to stand near that lantern. The bullet punched through the shutter, through the empty air where nobody was, and buried itself in the far wall. Silas had the muzzle flash marked. He fired both barrels of the shotgun through the shutter slit, spread wide at that range, and heard a heavier sound than a man grunting. A body coming down through cottonwood branches, catching, dropping to earth. Cole, Rose breathed. Maybe. The two behind the trough opened up then, rifles cracking, chewing the door and the shutters, and Silas pressed himself to the floor and let them empty their magazines into a house they thought held panicked prey. When their fire slackened for reloading, he was already moving. Out the back window he'd unlatched an hour before, into the shadow of the woodshed, around the blind side of the house. He came up behind the trough with the squirrel rifle. Drop M. One did. The other spun and Silas shot him in the shoulder. Not to kill, because a dead man tells nothing. And the rifle clattered and the man went to his knees swearing. The one who dropped his rifle was young. 20 maybe. Face bone white in the moonlight. Please, mister. Please. He paid us $50 each. That's all. I didn't know. Face down. Hands behind your head. He obeyed. Silas walked to the cottonwoods with the squirrel rifle ready. Cole was there under the tree, one leg twisted wrong beneath him, a rifle 3 feet from his outstretched hand. Alive, breathing shallow, a pattern of buckshot across his chest and neck. Cole's eyes tracked Silas as Silas crouched beside him. You should have taken the trade, Cole wheezed. Should have, maybe. Vale will send more. Then he'll send them. Cole tried to laugh. It came out red at the corner of his mouth. You don't know what she is. Silas looked at him a long moment. Yeah, he said. I do. She's the witness. He stood up and walked away and left Cole under the cottonwood tree to finish what the buckshot had started. Inside, Rose was on her feet, swaying, the Colt still gripped in her left hand. Sit down, he said, and she sat. He took the pistol gently and set it on the table. Her shoulder had bled through the bandage, the recoil, the movement. He pushed her hair back from her face with his palm, and she didn't flinch. First time she hadn't flinched. Cole, done. The others. One dead in the yard. One shot but breathing. One surrendered, a boy. $50 a head, he says. She closed her eyes. A long breath went out of her that seemed to take a piece of 6 months' terror out with it. There's more, she said. Vale himself. 2, 3 more guns. They'll come. Not tonight. No, not tonight. He heated water. He unwound the soaked bandage from her shoulder, cleaned the wound again with whiskey, packed it fresh. She watched his hands work. Big hands, scarred across the knuckles from a lifetime of horses and rope and one bad fall onto barbed wire. You were a soldier, she said. It wasn't a question. Long time ago. Union. 2 years. You saw bad things. I did. And after. Came west. Bought this land. Married a good woman. Buried her a year ago come November. Rose was quiet. Then, softly, what was her name? Mary. Mary Rourke. Mary Rourke. He tied off the bandage. Sat back on the chair opposite her. The lantern still burned on the table between them, and outside the wounded man moaned in the yard, and the boy prisoner sobbed quietly under his breath, and none of it seemed to reach into the small warm circle of light, where a rancher and a witness looked at each other honestly for the first time. She reached into her collar, awkward with her good hand, and drew out something on a length of rawhide. A ring. A plain gold band, worn thin. My mother's, she said. She was a laundress in Denver. She raised me alone. She died of consumption when I was 19, and this ring is all I have left of her. And when they put a knife in my shoulder, they tore it off my neck, and I stole it back before I killed him. She held it up in the lantern light. I wear it because I need to remember I come from somebody. That I ain't just a witness. That I'm hers. She put the ring back beneath her shirt. You keep going, Silas said quietly. Because you're your mother's daughter. Yeah. Then you're going to keep going, Rose Halloran. She looked at him across the table. Her eyes glistened, but nothing fell. Silas, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for tonight. He nodded. He couldn't speak, exactly. Not without something coming loose in his throat that he'd kept locked down for a year. Outside, in the cold and the dark, the boy prisoner had stopped sobbing. The wind had come back, low and mournful across the ridge. And somewhere out past the North Wash, Silas knew, another rider was already coming. A man named Vale who owned judges and burned safe houses and did not stop. But the lantern burned steady on the table. And it was enough, for now, to be 2 people alive in its light. Vale came at dawn. He came alone, which surprised Silas until he thought about it, and then it didn't. A man like Vale, a man who owned judges and marshals and boys for $50 a head, didn't ride with a posse to finish a personal loose end. He rode alone because he wanted to be the one who did it. He wanted the last thing Rose Halloran ever saw to be his face. Silas watched him come from the ridge in the pearl light. A tall man on a black horse. Long coat. Rifle across the saddle. Riding down the wagon track slow, the way Cole had ridden the day before, and Silas understood that patient men shared habits. He'd sent the boy prisoner off 2 hours before, wrists tied loose enough to work free by noon, with a message for Sheriff Halden in Cripple Fork, federal witness alive at Rourke Place. Send whoever you trust. Do not send anyone you don't. The wounded man he'd bandaged and tied in the barn. Cole and the yard dead were laid out under a tarp behind the woodshed. He didn't know if Halden would come. He didn't know if Halden could be trusted either. But it was the only card he had left to play, and he had played it. Rose stood beside him at the window slit, pale but upright, the Colt in her hand. That's him, she said. Her voice didn't shake. Figured. Silas, let me do it. He came for me. He looked at her, then at the black horse coming down through the frost-dusted sage, then back at her. You steady enough? I'm steady. Left hand. Left hand shoots true. My father taught me. Silas didn't ask about her father. There would be time later, if there was a later, for every question. You take the porch, he said. I'll take the barn corner. He sees you first, that's what he wants. He'll ride close to talk. He always does. He needs to say something before he shoots. Men like him always need to say something. When he speaks, you don't answer. You shoot. First and only. I'll be there if you miss. I won't miss. She walked out onto the porch as Vale came down the last of the track. Silas slipped out the side and around to the barn corner, shotgun ready, and watched. Vale reined up 20 feet from the porch. He was handsome the way a knife is handsome. Clean-shaven, silver at the temples, expensive coat, eyes the pale gray of ice on a shallow creek. He looked at Rose standing there in the borrowed shirt with the Colt at her side, and he smiled a small, tired smile, like a man greeting a problem that had at last consented to be solved. Rose, he said, you've had quite a run. She said nothing. I want you to know, Vale went on. There was never anything personal in this. You were simply in the wrong hallway at the wrong hour. If it helps, and I suspect it doesn't, the judge was a corrupt man himself. What I did to him was, she shot him through the throat. He fell sideways off the black horse and hit the ground once and didn't move again. The horse startled and trotted a few steps and stopped, confused, and began to graze. Silas came around the corner with the shotgun still raised, ready for more men, ready for any trick. But the ridge was empty, and the yard was empty, and the only sound was the horse's teeth in the frozen grass and Rose breathing hard on the porch. The Colt hung at her side. Silas walked to her slow. Rose. She looked at him. Her hard right eye was clear. The swelling around the left had gone down some in the night. He wanted to talk, she said quietly. You were right. Yeah. He wanted me to hear him first. I know. She lowered herself to the porch step and sat, and after a moment Silas sat down beside her, and they watched the sun come up proper over the ridge, gold spilling across the sage, the frost burning off in little curls of steam, and neither of them spoke for a long time. Sheriff Halden arrived by afternoon with 4 men Silas didn't recognize, and one he did. A circuit judge from Prescott named Bell who had, once, 20 years before, refused a bribe from a cattle baron and lost half his career for it. Silas took that as a sign. Rose gave her statement in Silas's kitchen with Judge Bell writing it down and Halden watching the door. She named Vale. She named Cole. She named the 2 deputies in Denver who had sworn the federal judge died of a heart attack. She named the hotel and the room and the transom she had looked through, and when she was done Judge Bell folded the pages carefully into his coat and looked at her a long time. Miss Halloran, he said, you have just cost several powerful men everything they own. Good. You may need to testify. In Denver. In front of a court that will try very hard to break you. I know. Are you afraid? She thought about it. Honestly. Yes, she said. But not the way I was. She stayed 9 weeks at the Rourke place while her shoulder healed, and while Judge Bell arranged for her to travel east under the protection of men he trusted personally, 3 of them, handpicked. In those 9 weeks, she learned to feed the chickens with her left hand, and she learned that Silas took his coffee bitter, and she read every book Mary Rourke had left on the shelf above the stove. And one evening, she caught Silas standing in the yard looking at the rocker through the window, with something raw and unguarded on his face. And she went outside and stood beside him and didn't say anything, and he was grateful for that more than he could have said. The morning she left, she gave him the gold ring on the rawhide cord. "I want it back," she said. "When it's done. When I've testified and Vale's dead men are all in the ground legal. I'll come get it. You promise?" "I promise." She kissed his cheek. Once, brief, the way a sister kisses a brother going to war, and mounted the horse Judge Bell had brought for her, and she rode out down the wagon track between two of Bell's men, and Silas stood on the porch and watched until the cottonwoods hid her. He put the ring in Mary's rocker for safekeeping. He waited. She came back in the spring, 8 months later, on a bay horse of her own, wearing a proper coat and a proper hat and a smile that had grown into her face like it belonged there. Vale's organization had been broken. 6 men were hanged. Cole's badge was returned to the marshals as a warning to what happened when men bought them. Rose Halloran was, by then, a small kind of famous, though she never much cared for it. She rode up the wagon track in the last light of a soft April day, and Silas was on the porch mending a saddle, and he looked up and saw her, and he stood, and the saddle slid off his lap unnoticed. She reined up at the porch step. "Silas Rourke. Rose Halloran. I've come for my ring." He went inside and took it from Mary's rocker where it had waited 8 months, and he brought it out and put it into her palm, and she looked at it, and then she looked at him. "I was thinking," she said, "that I might not put it back around my neck. No. I was thinking I might put it on my finger, if there was somebody willing to be there when I did." Silas Rourke, who had not smiled properly in a year and a half, smiled then. "Ma'am," he said, "I believe there is." Years later, a boy would ask his mother about the gold ring worn thin. She would sit him in her lap on the porch of the ranch house 9 miles from Cripple Fork, and she would tell him about a night she came bleeding into a barn, and a rancher who was tired of burying things, and a lantern that burned steady on a plank table while the world tried to kill them both. And she would tell him that the bravest thing his father ever did was ask her name. Out past the North Ridge, the wind still moved through the sage. The cottonwoods still turned in autumn, and on the beam above the kitchen door, if a traveler looked close, they would see 2 names carved deep into the wood, Silas Rose, and beneath them, in smaller letters, the date of the morning the sun came up gold over the ridge, and 2 people, alive, watched it together.